Welcome to the Outdoor Sports Club, everybody. This video is a long video, so I'm just going to kind of narrate over what should almost exclusively be a 500% video speed of some of the stuff that I did while I made the video. Basically, this is a project that a friend of mine asked me to do. He knows I'm not a carpenter, he knows that I'm not a craftsman, and he knows that I don't have all the tools that would be necessary to do this the right way. But essentially, it's an epoxy top modification to a desk. We're extending the desk, and we are adding a special, a custom top that he designed, it's an idea that he came up with. I've got a little bit of a special, I guess, treat for him that he doesn't know about, that I'm going to throw into it as well. But essentially, this is my first time doing an epoxy pour, and so I thought I'd try to record it. The recordings aren't as good as what I wanted to do because I was focusing so much on trying to get the job done and done correctly that I didn't record as much as I wanted to. But so basically, we will go through what's going on. So here I've already extended the desk. This is an L-shaped computer desk. We're turning it into a U-shape, so I'm extending one of the L's to make some more room, and the computer's going to go from the side with the credenza on it to this side that I'm working on now. So I'm drilling. I drilled and slotted a hole for cords to go, and then I realized that I needed to shove the tower over closer to the wall, and so I made a hole on the other side. So that I've already extended the desk and painted the desk, and I'm going to paint it again, but I got the first coat down. I probably should have done the holes and slots first, but anyway, I've marked the holes. I'm drilling with a smallish bit, and then I'm going with a 3/4 inch bit. As it turns out, the 3/4 inch bit was just barely big enough for the cords. But I do a lot of eyeball work because I don't have the right tools. I'm fairly decent at doing, eyeballing cuts with my circular saw and with this jigsaw, and even with hand saws. They're not perfect cuts, but I usually sand them down a little bit to where they're hardly noticeable. Alright, so now we got another hole over here. They were gonna put a printer over there. They wound up doing he wound up doing a different kind of a different setup, but the hole that I'm cutting here wound up working just fine for what they were doing. It was going to be for a printer cable and some power cables and things like that, but it wound up being a little bit different. So I actually mess up here, and I'm very fortunate that I caught it, because there is a set of drawers underneath that what would be the left-hand side. I'm at the back of the desk right now, and I'm just really happy that I drilled this hole first, because I realized after I drilled it that the other end of that slot was going to be on or over the wall of the drawer. So I moved it over an inch. It wasn't a big deal. I just shortened up the slot by an inch. So we got lucky there. Normally I figure out my mistakes as I make them or after. So there we go. While this is going on, I will say this. I had an extended 4th of July weekend. I had already extended the table and put the first coat of paint on prior to that weekend, but I was off basically Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So I've got this done in the weekend. So we sanded the top. I just roughed it up basically and then cleaned it up. Just to make sure that my next coat was going to be fine. I wanted to smooth it out a little bit and then paint it. This roller I got for a bathroom remodel that we were doing, and this roller actually really stinks. It's not it puts a good texture down, but it doesn't roll very well. You've got to hold the pressure just right to make it roll. So basically, I just paint on some stuff and then give it the texture with the roller. It wound up looking pretty good. But yeah, it took if you don't count curing, basically after the final pour of the epoxy, we let it cure for 3 days. But if you don't count that time, it took me a good solid week probably to do this. Now that's in addition to my real job, so this was just nights, and then that 4-day weekend I spent a lot of time out here working on it. Would have gone faster if I had a table saw and maybe a router. I am an extremely amateur everything I do. There's nothing I do that I'm good at. So anyway, let's see how it goes. Okay, so our next step here is I've got some glow-in-the-dark powder. It's way more expensive for what it is, but we're going to paint that in lines, and I've just got to figure out where the lines need to be for painting and tape them off. So that's our next step. I've got some templates here that I cut out for some things that I'm going to put down in the epoxy, so bugs keep getting on here and dying. Okay, so I do a lot, or I have done in the past, a lot of kind of detail work with painter's tape on little projects that I do. So in this particular case, I didn't want to put marks on the table, on the paint. So what I did is I spent a lot of time, this took maybe an hour, and I marked where specific lines were going to be with tape, and then I ran tape in between them. And then I came back and did did some detail work with little pieces of tape where I needed to kind of patch corners and stuff like that. Now I really wish I knew how much Mod Podge to use, because this glow powder stuff is really it was like $25 for this bag, and so I wound up with a lot of glue mixture left over, and I was just kind of bummed that I wasted that much glow powder, but it wasn't a big deal. Basically just glow powder mixed with glue and paint it in between the lines. This glue dries pretty fast, and as I tore up the places where I'd started, it actually tore the edges of the glue. So you got to get this tape up fast if you're going to do it like I do it. I went back with basically I took a straight edge and held it up against the line and just dabbed a little bit more glue, and it fixed most of the spots. There were a few spots where I dabbed it a little bit too much, or I brushed it. You know, I didn't get the thickness just right where it's a little bit light, and you can tell, but it's not that big of a deal. This stuff dries basically sort of a translucent white, I guess you could say, and then it glows a little blue at night. A little bit. It's not super bright the way I did it. Biggest mistake I made in the entire process. I bought some HVAC tape. It's pretty cheap HVAC tape, and it doesn't stick worth a darn to this kind of stuff. And it's really flimsy. So what wound up happening was, in some places the tape leaned in, and in some places the epoxy pushed it out. So the edge is not straight, and it's really unfortunate because it needs to be straight. I should have just let it run over the edge like they recommend, but I didn't. So this is the biggest mistake I made, and it's the thing that I regret the most, is putting this tape around the edge. I had to have my son come out and help me, because there's some very specific mixing instructions on this epoxy. You can see all the measuring buckets I have down there. I got a lot of measuring buckets. This being my first time to do the epoxy, a lot of people have it not cure properly. There will be hard spots, and there will be soft spots that stay sticky forever. And some people have had it cure too fast, and so anyway, I didn't want any of that happening. I had my son on a timer. They say don't mix this stuff more than 6 to 8 minutes. So the way I mixed it, and I think this is what I would recommend, is get lots of appropriate sized measuring devices. Go ahead and pour your hardener, pour your epoxy, make sure they're exactly the same. If you're going to have one that's a touch more, make it the epoxy, because it's really thick and it doesn't run out of the container as well, so not all of it comes out, but get them as close to exactly the same by volume as you can. Pour the hardener in first because it's thin and it wants to rise to the top. Okay, pour your epoxy in. Start your timer. It takes a bit to scrape out the epoxy. and then start stirring. You want to use a flat bottom stick. Make sure you scrape the bottom and the sides while you're stirring, and also the hardener rises to the top, so make sure you fold it back down into the mixture. At about he was giving me 3 minutes to pour into the second container. They recommend you mix twice. I would recommend that as well. And I was pouring at about 1.5 to 2 minutes because it clouds up when you first mix it, and as the chemical reaction starts happening, it clears up. So once it started clearing up, I poured it into the second container, mixed it for a little bit, and then once it was basically crystal clear, I poured it out. I had no problems doing it that way. We had to spread it around here because I poured it sort of unevenly. This is our first seal coat, so we just basically have to spread it around and then let it sit for 4 hours. This might make you seasick, but I'm basically using my torch to pop air bubbles, which was really easy. There weren't that many air bubbles since I put latex paint on there. Okay, so we kind of skipped a step here. I thought we recorded it, but what he wanted was these game covers to be put down on the epoxy and then embedded in the epoxy, and we laminated these. Looking back, I wish that we wouldn't have laminated them. I wish we would have glued them down and then clear coated over the top of it and then epoxied, but oh well. It was an extra cost and an extra step, extra time, and there are some air bubbles in there in the laminate that you can see because of the laminate. We did that seal coat over the top of those, and now we're doing the flood coat. Same process, it's just the flood coat's a lot thicker. Also, after 4 hours of that first seal coat, when we went to stick the game covers down, they stuck. Like, we had to make sure we got them in the right spot when we put them down because they were there. And it actually worked out really well because it was hard, but it was sticky enough that we could just set them on top and they would stay in place. Okay, I'm not for sure if this will do it justice, but this has been out here for about an hour, and it's looking pretty good. It looks great so far. I hope it sets up properly. It seems to so far be setting up properly. I don't seem to be running into any of the issues that other people have reported. And even though some of these are going to be covered, and I'll talk more about that later, I think they're going to put a printer here, and then the screens are, I've talked about this before, but the screens are going to go there and the tower's going to go down there. So anything at the very top of this is going to be covered. Those two down there are going to be covered. And then these 5 right here are going to be covered. Everything else should be visible. But I think they'll be happy with it. And that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. I'm glad I thought of that. There's stuff glowing over there too because of my waste, and then I decided, since I had so much extra, it's not gonna focus on it. It's kind of a ghostly face. That's one of my carvings I did. And he glows in the dark now too. Kind of eerie. Anyway, I'm very happy with it, and I'm gonna leave it alone for tonight, and it's gonna set up, and we'll come look at it tomorrow.